We at the Foundation have produced this videotape with a number of objectives in mind. The main one was to help place the problem of alcohol and drug abuse into a realistic context. Some other objectives were to help you understand how lack of self-esteem, peer influence, risk-taking, and different values contribute to the use of alcohol and drugs amongst youth. And secondly, to help you appreciate the limitations of current popular approaches to drug education. A lot of the following facts, ideas, and general information you will already know, but this videotape should help you appreciate them in the context of alcohol and drug education. The use of drugs by young people that we most often hear about and think of as the drug problem, the abuse and misuse of drugs, including alcohol, is widespread throughout all age levels of our society. The characteristic of drugs used by young people that makes them so noteworthy is that most of them, marijuana, hashish, LSD, are illegal. However, many legal drugs, such as alcohol, the nicotine in cigarettes, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and headache remedies, are used and misused by adults every day. The use of legal drugs has become a part of our way of life. Drugs are manufactured in large numbers and advertised on television, radio, billboards, and in magazines. These advertisements seem to promote the idea that there is a chemical cure for everything. Every pain, every minor annoyance can be cured by a drug. Even the advertising of legal drugs, such as nicotine or alcohol, that are not manufactured specifically to cure a pain or a problem, often suggests that beautiful people, sunshine, and good times will accompany the use of a specific brand of beer or cigarette. The message and appeal of illegal drugs is quite similar to the message and appeal of legal drugs. They both can offer immediate relief and gratification, an instant solution to problems, or quick and easy escape or pleasure. Having been brought up in a society that relies heavily on legal drugs for relief and pleasure, it is not really surprising that many young people use illegal drugs for similar reasons. Besides advertising and the widespread use of legal drugs, there are a number of other social factors that contribute to the drug problem. Illegal drugs are certainly more available now than 10 or 15 years ago. Today's adolescents have a greater amount of spending money and leisure time. And with popular musicians singing about and using drugs, there appears to be a general decline in the cultural taboos against drug use. But we cannot account entirely for the problem of drug abuse by such factors as advertising or an increase in leisure time. There are personal and psychological factors that contribute more directly to drug abuse. For example, consider two young people who use marijuana. One has experimented with a couple of times out of curiosity, while the other uses marijuana frequently as a means of coping with family problems. There is considerable difference in motivation, and this is an important factor to consider when distinguishing between the use of a drug as opposed to the misuse or abuse. In the first instance, marijuana is being used to satisfy his curiosity. In the second instance, it is being misused as a means of dealing with family problems. In terms of motivation, misuse or abuse is often defined as using a drug to fill a need that the drug cannot pharmacologically fill. Another example of misuse would be the use of stimulants to improve athletic skills when only practice will improve skills. As adults, we probably have some knowledge or experience with the misuse of alcohol. The proper use of wine might be to enhance a fine meal, whereas the misuse of liquor would be attempting to deal with marital problems or job pressures through excess of drinking. Besides personal experiences that may lead to drug abuse, there are also some very basic needs of adolescents which, if they are not met, often lead to drug abuse. Some of the more pressing needs of adolescents are those of self-esteem, emotional security, and a sense of belonging. In attempting to meet these needs, a young person will adopt whatever ideas, skills, attitudes, or other resources are available. When an adolescent is frustrated or blocked in his or her attempt to meet these needs, the result is often feelings of tension, anxiety, failure, guilt, or inadequacy. One way of dealing with these feelings is the use of drugs. Personality profiles of young drug abusers usually reveal three common characteristics: low self-esteem, a high susceptibility to peer influence, and a willingness and desire to take risks. A young person's self-esteem is being continually influenced, both positively and negatively, by those around him or her, especially by parents, teachers, and peers. Here is an example of negatively influencing a student's self-esteem.
Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. Did you happen to read the story?
Now, the same situation, but with a positive influence.
That's a very interesting interpretation. I'd be interested in knowing what it was exactly in the story that made you feel that way. Maybe we could all discuss that.
Susceptibility to peer influence reflects an adolescent's strong need for a sense of belonging. Since drinking alcohol and other forms of drug taking is usually done in groups, this can become a means of fulfilling the need to belong. Peer influence is a powerful force in the life of an adolescent, and its effects can be seen in all types of group activity, from drinking to sports. There is an additional need of young people that contributes to alcohol and drug abuse, that of risk-taking. Research has shown that adolescents, especially those who are prone to drug abuse, tend to score higher on tests indicating a willingness and desire to take risks. To repeatedly emphasize and stress the large risk element in taking drugs may turn out to be a positive appeal rather than a deterrent. Besides the differences in psychological needs between adults and young people, there is usually a significant difference in values regarding alcohol and drugs. Experienced individuals in the field of alcohol and drug education agree that there is no way in which teachers and students can discuss the pros and cons of drug use, let alone the broader questions of the planning of one's life, if they are not fully aware of the different value criteria and measurement that they bring to the discussion. In working with young people, you are probably made aware each day of some of the differences between your own values and those of your students. In the area of drug use, there are usually three prominent value differences that exist between adults and adolescents. They are the values of pleasure as opposed to production, experience as opposed to achievement, and the present as opposed to the future. Adolescents usually place a high value on pleasure and often defend their use of drugs on the basis of the pleasure it provides. They may criticize adults as being so obsessed with work that they have lost the ability to let themselves go. Adults, on the other hand, faced with numerous responsibilities, must often value productivity over pleasure and be willing to postpone or even forego pleasure in order to enhance their own productivity. Young people experimenting with drugs will often place a high value on experience for its own sake. Drugs are often used in the search for new feelings, new encounters, new insights, and new experiences.
But you have to realise that we all got to go through life once, and everybody should experience everything in life, and an acid stone is a good experience.
Adults, however, have usually realized the value of mastery and achievement. The disciplined development of certain selected skills and achievement provides a satisfaction that is absent in tasting a little bit of everything but not going into depth with anything. Students using drugs will often place a high value on the present, the immediate. The past is gone and the future is not yet. It doesn't seem to make any sense to sacrifice the present moment because of past events or because of what might happen in the near future. But an adult usually realizes that it is important to learn from the past and to plan the future, even if it means sacrificing certain things in the present. Having seen some of the differences that exist between our own values and those of young people, the task would now seem to be to change their values and behavior by providing them with the facts about drugs. If it was only that simple, the relationship between one's knowledge, values, and behavior is a very complex one. A number of studies indicate that simply providing information about drugs will probably have little impact, positively or negatively, on the audience's attitudes or use. Under some conditions, the more knowledge a student has about drugs, the more likely he or she is to hold attitudes or have values favoring the use of drugs. This may be due to the fact that factual programs desensitize a young person's fear of drugs, which in many cases could lead to greater experimentation and use of drugs. We are probably quite familiar with the little or no effect that facts have on our own behavior. We are all aware of the dangers of smoking, drinking, overeating, or lack of exercise. Yet we still continue to smoke, drink, overeat, and not exercise. So if the straight facts about drugs are not effective, or even counterproductive in positively affecting values or behavior, what are some other approaches we could use? 4 of the better known ones are scare 'em, tell 'em, convince 'em, and preach to 'em. None of these approaches are totally ineffective. They will certainly affect some students for some period of time. However, each one does have limitations. Probably the most famous is the scare 'em technique, often used by teachers in films about drugs. But there are a number of drawbacks to this approach. To distort the facts, as these films often do, endangers the teacher's credibility. For the students often know or have access to accurate information. Another threat to the teacher's credibility is that students may have experimented with drugs or know people who have, without suffering the effects portrayed in the film.
Like, I've been smoking 2 or 3 years now. I had no desire to drop any acid or use heroin or anything like this.
Finally, although research has shown nothing conclusive about the effects of a scare approach, indications are that a high scare approach is not particularly effective. The tell 'em method reflects an authoritarian approach with reason and logic absent. The basic message is that drugs are bad because I, an adult, say so.
But more and more, there's no doubt about it, the drugs are no good, and that's all there is to it.
The limitation here is that this approach depends on the presence of authority. If students are able only to follow authority, they may be ineffectual when authority is silent or absent. This approach does little to help students make their own decisions. In the convince 'em approach, reason and logic are used, but it is one-sided.
definitely psychologically dependent on marijuana. LSD is a lot more of a dangerous drug. From LSD, you could suffer permanent psychosis, flashbacks, or some states of schizophrenia have been known to be derived from it.
This approach might work if the student was never exposed to the reason and logic of the pro-drug argument. Research has shown that a one-sided campaign which ignores opposition arguments can give a false appearance of strength to the student's anti-drug beliefs. But they leave the person vulnerable when later on he or she is confronted with the logic of the pro-drug argument.
Well, Harry really gave a good lecture, you know. It was alright, you know, I enjoyed it.
You really enjoyed the lecture, did you?
Oh, yes.
I didn't think it was very good.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, he talked a lot about psychological dependence. I thought that was a lot of crap, because everybody knows that booze and cigarettes are a lot more dangerous than dope, and they're still selling them, right?
There is an alternative method of doing alcohol and drug education. It is called values clarification. Two of the greatest advantages to this method is that it provides the student with skills that can be applied to any problem area. It also facilitates the maturity of the student through encouraging him or her to take responsibility for his or her own life and not leave it in the hands of their peers or elders.